Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee. My name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Roosevelt, Mississippi, Sunflower County, the home of Senator James O. Eastland and Senator Stinnett. If the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off of the hook because our lives be threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America?
When the MFDP appeal was rejected, Hamer and other members vowed to keep fighting. During this period, Hamer's political experience grew. She became acutely aware that the human crisis faced by blacks in her state was also a plague throughout the nation. Johnson won the Democratic nomination as the Vietnam War grew. After the Atlantic City Convention, Hamer and the MFDP developed strategies to take their case to the United States Congress. Since blacks in Mississippi were prevented from nominating and voting for their own candidates, the MFDP conducted its own election. Their ballot listed the white incumbent and the MFDP opponent. Hamer was on the ballot representing the 2nd District. She received 33,000 votes against 49 for the incumbent. In September of 1965, 15,000 pages of evidence were presented to the congressional subcommittees on elections when they heard their case. It proved that 40% of Mississippi's people were being denied voting rights guaranteed by the Constitution.
Racial progress? Almost 100 years ago during Reconstruction, John Lynch placed this same kind of challenge before the House of Representatives. He was a black man from Mississippi, and he succeeded with Yankee white help. But we failed 100 years later with native white Mississippi help and Yankee opposition. So, you see, this is not Mississippi's problem. It is America's problem.
It's rare. It's rare these days to see people with that kind of courage. I think I really don't know where she get this courage that she had, but it was obvious that it was, and everybody sort of saw it in her. When she would speak and talk, it would rage. You know, that she knew what she was talking about. She was dead right in what she was saying. Some may not necessarily agree, but I think they had to respect it because she was speaking from the heart, and she did it in such a dramatic way, I should say, that was unique, although simple.
Although they met defeat for the 2nd time, the MFDP's pressure was a major factor in forcing Congress to pass the 1965 Voting Rights Act. 3 years later, at the Chicago Democratic Convention, Hamer and the biracial delegation, now named the Mississippi Loyalist Democrats, stood up one more time and challenged political exclusion. This time, they succeeded in replacing the old establishment. Hamer was elected committeewoman for the Mississippi Democratic National Committee and served 3 years.
The lot of blacks in the South has not improved very much in any particular area. The areas which I consider most important for changes to be made are in the areas of political and economic power. Black people must register and vote.
As Hamer's political participation increased, she became more knowledgeable of the depth of America's racial problems. By 1968, she saw that this was not a battle solely for black rights, but a war for human rights. This same year, Hamer worked closely with Dr. King to help him organize the Poor People's Campaign. His strategy was to build a multiracial coalition of poor people to demand economic parity.
We have to realize just how grave the problem is in the United States today.
After Dr. King's assassination in April of 1968, the civil rights movement's momentum slowed. Hamer, like many of the other influential people who had risen to be national figures, returned home. In Mississippi, Hamer continued to aid poor blacks living in Ruleville and Sunflower County. She also led the fight that brought the Head Start program for low-income children to her state. Her national reputation in civil rights presented her the opportunity to travel to Africa and Europe. Despite her influence, she remained humble. Hamer also delivered jobs by bringing a garment factory to Ruleville. And she was instrumental in opening a low-cost daycare center named after her. When plantation workers found themselves without jobs after farms started using machines, Hamer formed the Freedom Farm Cooperative that grew to 680 acres. Hamer's early years were hard. She and her brothers and sisters spent long hours picking cotton on white plantation owners' farms for very little money.